Welcome to the 94th episode of the Online Tennis Podcast. It's myself, Jack, and today I'm joined by John Silk to review the women's draw at the French Open. John, how you doing?
Long time, Jack.
Has been, hasn't it? I think it's been 3 seconds, and now we're going to dive straight into the women's draw. I'll get it up on the screen. Here we go. Right, John, where to start with the women's draw at the French Open? For me, big stories first. A couple of things from qualifying I was going to mention. Of course, no British women in the draw. All got knocked out in qualifying, unfortunately. Sofia Kenin out in the first round of qualifying as well. Of course, French Open finalist from 3 years ago. Mara Andreeva as well qualified after beating Camila Osorio. And then Brenda Fruhvirtova coming through after saving match point in our first round of qualifying too. Brenda, of course, only, I believe, 15, 16 years old, maybe 16. So, yeah, very impressive. John, any other stories from qualifying?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily any other ones, but to add to it, yeah, the Kenin one is just one of those that she seems to be in a situation. She's sort of the Aslan Karatsev in a way of the women's side. I mean, obviously she's won a Grand Slam, unlike Aslan, but in that she's just all or nothing at the moment. 1 minute she's beating Sabalenka. And the next minute she's going out in the first round of qualifying. And I was shocked that she went out so early, but I think she's sort of very much someone who's very hot and cold at the moment. And one other thing regarding Andreeva and Osorio, that match was an insanely high level. It was the third round of qualifying. It was one that many of us sort of ringed at the potential of it happening at the beginning of qualifiers. It did happen, and it lived up to all expectations. I think Osorio will probably get lucky and that she'll probably end up being a lucky loser. Paula Badosa is amongst the players that have recently pulled out of the tournament, of course. So, and that Osorio Andreeva, honestly, the level and that could easily be a second week match at the French Open. It was that sort of level, not a qualifier. So, yeah, fingers crossed for the Colombian at least that she still makes it in one way or another. And Andreeva, I mean, yeah, things are looking good for her long term, I would say.
Yeah, 100% look out for her. At the moment, qualifiers, lucky losers not put into the draw, so it could make a big difference where she goes. For now, though, we'll look at what our favourites are looking like in the draw, a few of our first round picks and stuff. I would say it's probably a 3-horse race, John. I think most people are in the same boat, right? I think most people have got either Iga, they've got Rybakina, or they've got Sabalenka. I'm not saying they're all in level pegging, but I'm saying they are probably in everybody's favourites, probably. Unless you've got something else to add to the mix, John.
The question for me is Krejcikova, but I've gone big on her since January and been burnt once or twice. I've also not been burnt, such as when she won in, was it Dubai, when she won that tournament, beating Iga in the final.
And Sabalenka, of course.
Yeah, of course she beat. Oh, yes, she beat. Of course, yes. Sorry, she beat Sabalenka en route. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think that Krejcikova, her record in Roland Garros is somewhat better than Sabalenka's. 3 of the 4, if I include Krejcikova in the mix, if you like, are on one side of the draw, which all plays out, and that's actually interesting because actually I think there's an argument to put Sabalenka at 4th. If I make that the group of 4, and I certainly, if you want to go for the group of 3 that you have, I would certainly put Sabalenka in 3rd. Amongst those 3, I mean, it's between Sabalenka and Rybakina as to who you think is a bigger threat to Iga, if you like. And I would put Sabalenka ahead I'd put Rybakina ahead of Sabalenka. So, yeah, of course, we're thinking about the draw as well. But yeah, I'm going to include Krejcikova in that, albeit that I know you could easily come back at me and say, look, she's got all these not great results during the clay court season.
I mean, it's fair enough. Krejcikova definitely has not, she's won the French Open for a reason. She was amazing when she won that year. She's got a very difficult game to counter. She's one of the few players that actually relishes playing Iga Swiatek rather than backs down, obviously having beaten her twice the 2 last times she played her. On clay, though, I think it's a different issue, and that is the reason I'm not putting her in my top 3. She is going to be a 4th round for Swiatek if she does get that far, and I think Swiatek overpowers Krejcikova on clay. I don't think it's the same as a hard court where Krejcikova can take time away from Iga. I just think she's got too much time to set up her shots. Obviously, it could be a very close match, but I just don't see how Iga doesn't get through. That said, I think a lot of people have a little bit of a worry about Iga after Rome because she had to pull out of that match with Rybakina. To me, that kind of says I'm willing to pull out of this title defense, the title I've won 2 years in a row, to make sure that I am ready for the French Open. Any sort of injury scare, she was straight out of there. I don't think it was a proper issue. I think it was something that could have become an issue, if that makes sense, John. So I don't think health-wise we've got anything to worry about for Iga. She should be
I don't think so.
firing.
She said so to her pretty much publicly as well. Said that, after a couple of days, I felt fine. If that was the French Open final, she's not retiring from that match, and she probably still goes on to win it. I'm not too concerned about that. I mean, maybe we'll come back to, because I could easily go into a talk about who I think is going to win the tournament. Perhaps we'll return to that at the end.
Yeah, fair. And we'll come back onto that. Just looking at a few of Iga's other opponents while we're at it, and then we can move on to the aforementioned players there. Book's in the first round, a player that's going to get overpowered. Liu as well, not worried about. Third round again, Buzkova, not worried about that. Krejcikova really is the first threat if she gets through Andreescu and Azarenka, remember, as well. It's not the easiest job for her either.
Mm-hmm.
And then a Gauff quarter-final. I would like to elaborate a bit on that, John, because Gauff is not an issue for me at this tournament. She has just not inspired me at all with any confidence. No. She's lost in the second round of her last 4 tournaments. That gives you an idea of how underconfident she is. Not defending it anywhere near as well as she used to. Probably because of the forehand underconfidence. I think it all kind of stems back to that. But her whole game is starting to unravel a little bit. She's really not playing well, John.
No, I mean, I think she'll get things right, but I don't think she'll get things right over the next couple of weeks in Paris. I spoke to her in Madrid a few times, and I think she was using, I'm not sure if she was using kidology on the media or she was using kidology on herself in the way that she was trying to convince either herself or us that she was actually, not in a great situation a year ago, as in like in Madrid, if you like, and yet she ended up getting to the French Open final. But then she, as you said, didn't have a great tournament in Madrid, hasn't done great since. If somebody, was talking about Coco Gauff getting far in this tournament or going all the way to the final or something like that, I think it's really, really difficult to make any case for Coco Gauff other than to say she was a French Open finalist last year. That's almost it. And that's not that strong in 2023, if you like.
No, not at all. I mean, you've got Kalinina there, the person who made the final in Rome just a week ago against her. You've got Keys and Kudermetova, even Keys, who isn't the best on clay. These players can overpower Gauff at the moment. She's not inspiring me with her offensive game or her defensive game. I think big hitters could beat her, where I wouldn't have said that in the past. Let's look at Rybakina's draw. Right, so starting with lucky loser qualifier. Noskova already, obviously not the best second round for her, but I believe she wins that due to Noskova's inexperience on clay. Sorribes Tormo in the third. Owen from Tennis Nation would be very happy with this one because he's a massive Sorribes Tormo fan. And I've got to say that's not the best round for Rybakina. And I'm not kidding. It's no word of a lie. It's just one of those matchups that's so different it just might work. Because Rybakina will obviously want to overpower any player she gets on court with. If Sorribes Tormo's moving well enough, if the conditions are just slow enough, who knows? There could be a wee banana skin there. I'm not saying it's a red alert. I'm just saying it's one to watch out for, right? And then moving forward after that, Alexandrova had Maya. I think Rybakina is a better version of Alexandrova in a lot of ways. Hits a bigger ball on serve and flat. Beatrice Maya, again, she can overpower her. And then Jabeur or Kvitova, neither of those players definitely get to the quarters. Overall, John, I don't think it's the worst draw for Rybakina, but there's a couple of maybe dangerous moments in there.
Yeah, the Jabeur that went into that semi-final in Stuttgart, she would probably be added perhaps to that group of 4 players I mentioned before to make it a quintet. There we go. I've used the word quintet, so I can tick that off my list. But the problem that Jabeur, of course, had in that tournament, I think was a calf injury. It's certainly muscular anyway. And she's not shown any form since. Rybakina's draw's okay. Yeah, had admire, but you'd fancy Rybakina. And you'd probably go for a likely semi-final between her and Iga. We mentioned Krejcikova before, but I agree with your case that on funny enough, in the French Open, where Krejcikova, of course, has had her best slam result, you would still go for Iga there, but it could well go 3 sets. And I say I'm sort of occasionally getting closer to prediction, but I will keep my powder dry for another few more minutes on that one.
Cool, likewise. We can dive into what might happen in the semi-finals and beyond in a moment.
Yep.
First, let's take a look at Sabalenka's draw, who you did discuss earlier. You're putting her maybe fourth behind Krejcikova. On paper, without the draw, certainly Krejcikova could be put up there. But I think Sabalenka's got a good draw. Kostyuk, okay, is a little bit of a tough first round. Of course, that's going to be a little bit aggro as well, probably, John. And then Udvardy in the second round. Shui Zheng in the third round. They're all good rounds, honestly, in the first 3 rounds. And in the fourth round, that's when it gets a little bit trickier. Qinwen Zheng, of course, she should be difficult for anybody. She has the game to beat anybody in the world. I just don't know if we've seen it yet, John. So I think Sabalenka wins that, even though she should be a dangerous opponent. Yep. And then Garcia, Kasatkina in the quarters. Neither of those scare me. There's one other person in there I'd just like to draw our attention to. Vondrousova could be a potential banana skin for anybody. Obviously, quite an easy first round. Then Niemeyer or Kasatkina, either of those players, I think she beats. Ostapenko, Mercurial, who knows on the day, could get through that. In the quarters, that could be a tough one. Is that a fair dark horse, John, or am I just clutching at straws?
I know you've someone who's highlighted Vondrousova before, which is why I smiled. I agree regarding Sabalenka's draw in that if nobody's talking about a big 4, but they are talking about a big 3. But if we do add Krejcikova to that group of 4, if you like, 3 are on one half of the draw and 1 is on the other. So that on the face of it does look quite favorable. But now I'm looking at some of these names here. I think they can all beat someone who's never made it beyond the 3rd round in Paris. Kasatkina, Qinwen Zheng, as you mentioned, could cause her a problem. I think Kostyuk is a tricky first round compared. There's certainly easy ones that she could have had, although I do expect Sabalenka to win that. So there are arguments against her getting to the final, for example, which I think is probably the sort of question that we're posing ourselves right now. Her or the field to get to the final, I'm taking the field, as in the 64 potential opponents, if you like, in the semi-final. I would take the field. It's not that comfortable for her. If this was a hard court, oh boy, we'd have a very, very different conversation here. Ostapenko's in there too. We never know what Ostapenko's going to turn up. Like I said, I would take the field over her just because there's a few tricky opponents out there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Certainly Vondrousova, if I really wanted to back her, could get through Sabalenka on an off day for sure. Not even much of an off day. She's going to be tough to beat for sure. She's not played on slow clay for ages. She played in Rome. She lost to Rybakina, the eventual champ. Before that, she was horrible to play on this surface. So there's every chance. Who knows? Let's take a look at the other quarter before giving eventual champs, John, very quickly. I know you're pressed for time. There's not many threats in here. Garcia was in the other half, so Pegula would be there, and Pegula could actually get through just by virtue of a pretty tidy quarter. Because Sakkari, Mukova, I mean... Oof.
Oh, yes. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've got it written down here as something that just has to be mentioned about the draw. It's the tie of the first round between the men's and the women's draws. I mean, we don't know where some of these... I mean, if Andreeva ends up posing a threat for somebody, then that could be different. But certainly on the... I mean, that was it second or third round they played each other in Paris last year? 7-6, 7-6, was it? Something like that Mukova won.
Yeah.
I mean, that could certainly be a quarterfinal, I would say, in Paris, given if the draws panned out for both players. So that to be a first round, I feel dreadfully sorry for Maria, because I guess you'd probably make Mukova the favourite.
Yeah, I would as well. I definitely would. Mukova's not lost in a first round since the US Open last year. That's 12 tournaments in a row. She comes out flying, and then maybe there's a bit of an injury issue. There's something that maybe slows her down a little bit. But for the first few rounds, she's amazing. Like, Sakkari probably is the underdog very slightly there. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But generally, just in that quarter, there's nobody that totally fills me with confidence. I think Pegula gets a little underrated there, John, because she still is making the latter rounds in most tournaments she plays. She's got a pretty cushy draw in terms of the opponent she'd have to play. Collins obviously not playing with much pizzazz at the moment. And then Bencic, not the best on clay. I mean, I think it looks quite tidy for her to maybe just get through to the semis, genuinely.
But
Or
that,
Mukova goes on a tear.
I've seen that with Pegula a few times. I mean, she got to the quarters, I think, in Madrid,
Yes.
and I think was it Miami, maybe semi-finals. But like I say, yeah, the draw's quite kind to her again. Would I put her ahead of Krejcikova? No, but do I have her going further in this tournament than Barbora Krejcikova? Yes, I do. So that gives you a small clue as to at least one of the four players that I said, would be in the mix. In my opinion, isn't winning. So we're edging closer and closer to prediction time.
Yes, I think we're there now, John.
Okay.
I'm willing to dive in now. What's your thoughts? Who do you think is taking the title?
Two takes, if you like. One is that I'm going for Iga Swiatek. That is hardly, the biggest call of the century. But I'm doing so with a lot less confidence than I was just over 24 hours ago before the draw was made. I do think she's got a tricky draw. I feel a bit sorry for Barbora as well, by the way, because I think her ranking, which is about 13 in the world, has been severely affected by some unfortunate draws where she runs into Sabalenka or somebody like that in the fourth round, and therefore, she's not boosting her ranking by anywhere near as much as she could have done, and therefore she would avoid potentially Iga in the fourth round. I think having Rybakina, their head-to-head, I think we saw some things going on in Rome that suggested, before Swiatek retired, that suggested that the narrative, of course, on a slower clay court surface would very much go the way of the pole. But we still saw some narratives in there that said, hang on, it's not going to be as comfortable as perhaps we thought it might have been a few weeks or a few months ago. So that's semi-final. And then, if it was Sabalenka in the final, I, again, would favour Iga. I think the conditions here or in Paris compared to Madrid would certainly favour her. So that's kind of where we're at. I think, for me, Iga Swiatek, because she's just the best player on the world on this surface. She will probably just swat aside 2 or 3 players en route, whereas the other 3 players that I've mentioned, you never know. I mean, maybe Barbora doesn't make it to the fourth round, maybe Sabalenka doesn't make it to the final, and maybe Rybakina doesn't make it to the semis. All of those 3 things could happen, and then suddenly you're looking at a very comfortable horizon for Iga. But even if she has to go through those 3 players, that would be tough, but I'm still going for Iga Swiatek.
Yeah, I'm in pretty much exactly the same boat. I just think the chances of her beating anybody in her path are so much more likely than any one player coming through everybody else, right? I just think, as well, I think the fact, honestly, the Rome thing inspired me with a lot of confidence. She wants to be ready as she possibly can. It's quite a big deal to pull out of a tournament like Rome if it's a small issue, right? So I really think that she's taking it as seriously as she can. She probably did what was, best advised by her team. She's going to be, just like, take a look at how she's played the last, 2 times she's won here. It's insanity. It's just tennis on another level. It does not matter who's on the other side of the net. She finds a way to overpower them. She's a different breed in the French Open. She's not quite Rafa Nadal levels yet, but she's getting there. I mean, she is a different breed. But I had to pick a second. Yeah, I'd go Sabalenka second.
I'll go back in a second. I think that's probably the more interesting debate in a way. I do think Iga's draw makes it a little bit trickier, in my opinion. But yeah, I would go for Rybakina a second.
I might make a very last minute change and say that Vondrousova was going to knock Sabalenka out and then put Rybakina above Sabalenka, John. Why not? I think I'll say that.
There you go.
Yeah, that's my big take. Apart from that, Iga for the win. It's hardly crazy stuff, but that's what we're going for. Okay, John, we'll stop there. Thanks very much for joining me. Great episode as always. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you on the Online Tennis podcast soon, I'm sure.
Yep, I'm sure we'll be crossing paths again very, very soon.
Awesome. John, speak to you very soon. Thanks very much for listening, guys. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. We'll catch you next time on the Online Tennis podcast. Cheers, guys.